The Galactic Council had long dismissed Earth as an unremarkable planet in a nondescript star system. To most members of the Council, the tiny blue world was simply one of many habitable planets scattered across the Milky Way, notable only for its high nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere and a peculiar abundance of surface water. The people of Earth, the humans, were known for their primitive technologies, inconsistent cultural behavior, and seemingly chaotic nature. Their collective achievements, such as sending a few probes into space or setting foot on their own moon, hardly impressed the advanced civilizations that formed the Galactic Council. Thus, when the distress signal arrived from the Vexari exploratory vessel that had crashed on Earth, the Council was indifferent. To them, it was a routine emergency, a mere blip on their radar. The Vexari, a respected member species known for their advanced science and exploration capabilities, had sent out a squad of explorers on a mission to investigate possible habitable planets and document rare materials and life forms. Earth had simply been a waypoint on their journey, a detour to satisfy curiosity. The Council sent a message to the Vexari mothership in orbit around Earth to handle the situation swiftly and quietly. The exploratory team had crash-landed in a dense, untouched forest, and given the primitive nature of the local civilization, the incident did not seem urgent. The crash site, a thick patch of tropical jungle, was deep enough to be out of sight from prying human eyes. Surely this was a minor inconvenience that the Vexari could handle themselves. Yet, as days passed and communications from the surface ceased, the situation escalated. Commander Zorvac, the leader of the exploratory team, managed to send a fragmented emergency broadcast before going completely silent. His message hinted at the presence of unknown hazards in the environment, something that even their sophisticated technology could not comprehend. Commander Zorvac's exploratory team consisted of 6 members, each a specialist in their field: botanists, biologists, atmospheric scientists, engineers, and security experts. The mission was supposed to be a brief landing to collect samples of the local flora and assess the atmosphere for any valuable materials. Their landing craft, the Scion, had touched down smoothly, its silver hull reflecting the sunlight filtering through the thick canopy of the jungle. They emerged from their craft with the confidence of an advanced species, their exosuits glinting under the alien sun. The tropical jungle was unlike anything they had ever seen alive, with vibrant colors, strange calls, and the rustling of countless leaves. Gigantic trees with intertwined branches formed a canopy so thick that only narrow beams of sunlight touched the ground. Vines cascaded from the treetops like serpents, and the air was damp, thick with humidity and the earthy aroma of soil and plants. Despite its beauty, there was an underlying sense of danger, an untamed rawness that made the crew slightly uneasy. Commander Zorvac stood at the edge of their ship's landing ramp, taking in the landscape. His suit's heads-up display relayed information to him: atmospheric composition, temperature, humidity, radiation levels, all within expected parameters. He signaled his team to spread out and begin their work. They moved methodically, trusting their technology to protect them from any potential danger. The crew dispersed with confidence, ready to collect samples of what looked like exotic plant life and analyze the thick, vibrant atmosphere. It started as a minor annoyance. Engineer Tikal was the first to feel an irritating itch at the base of his neck, just beneath the helmet's seal. He adjusted his suit, thinking it was merely an equipment malfunction, but the sensation persisted. Within hours, the irritation turned into a rash, and he began to feel disoriented. The others started showing similar symptoms soon after. Botanist Velis complained of an intense headache, unlike anything she had experienced before. Biologist Nevak reported a strange tingling sensation in his limbs, accompanied by sudden fatigue. The crew's initial scans showed no signs of toxins, radiation, or biological contaminants that should have affected them. The atmosphere, while thick and humid, was well within their tolerance levels. They had landed on countless planets, each with its unique challenges, but none had been this puzzling. The jungle was loud, alive with the calls of unseen creatures, and while the Vexari were accustomed to alien sounds, There was something unsettling about the relentless, chaotic noises that surrounded them. It was as if the jungle itself was hostile. Commander Zorvac quickly recognized the need to regroup. He ordered everyone back to the landing craft to reassess their situation. Inside the Scion, they activated the craft's medical systems, hoping to diagnose the problem. The ship's AI, a sophisticated program designed to handle medical emergencies, scanned each crew member meticulously, yet the results were inconclusive. It detected elevated heart rates, mild fevers, and increased adrenaline levels, but there was no identifiable cause. The AI struggled to recognize the pathogens present in their systems. It was as though the microbial life of Earth was evolving too quickly for it to analyze and counteract. As night fell, the situation grew worse. The jungle transformed with the setting sun, becoming even more menacing. Strange, glowing insects flitted through the air, casting eerie lights around the ship. The sounds of the forest grew louder, almost deafening, as nocturnal creatures awoke. The crew, already weakened, found the noise disorienting, a constant reminder that they were far from home. Velis was the first to collapse. Her legs gave out as she attempted to stand, her vision blurring until she saw nothing but darkness. Panic set in among the crew. They administered her a broad-spectrum antidote, but it had no effect. Tikal's rash had spread across his body, turning his normally gray skin a deep, unsettling shade of red. He struggled to breathe, gasping for air despite the suit's filtration systems. Knife, who had initially reported the tingling sensation, now found his muscles seizing painfully, rendering him nearly immobile. Commander Zorvac watched in helpless frustration. He was responsible for the lives of his team, and their advanced technology was failing them in the face of an invisible, seemingly invincible enemy. The Earth's atmosphere, its microbial life, was unlike anything they had encountered. Its complexity and hostility were beyond their technology's capabilities. He sent out an emergency broadcast to the mothership, urging them to expedite their rescue efforts. But he knew that even if help came, it might be too late. The next morning, the team's condition had deteriorated further. Velis lay unconscious, her breathing shallow. Tikal was delirious, mumbling incoherently as his body fought an unknown infection. The remaining crew members, though still standing, felt the effects of whatever had infiltrated their systems: fevers, muscle pain, headaches. They were trained explorers, the best the Vexari had to offer, yet they were succumbing to something they couldn't even see. In their desperation, Commander Zorvac knew they needed to find an answer, and fast. He ordered the team to collect environmental samples from the jungle outside. It was risky, given their condition, but they had no other choice. They needed to understand what they were dealing with. The crew, weakened and afraid, obeyed their commander's orders, stumbling out into the oppressive heat of the jungle. The jungle, once merely a vibrant collection of flora and fauna, now felt like an enemy, an adversary actively working against them. Every leaf, every insect, every breath of air seemed to hold a hidden threat. Zorvac and his team moved slowly, collecting soil, plant, and water samples, their suits struggling to keep up with the increasing contamination. During their sampling, they noticed something peculiar. Amidst the towering trees and dense underbrush, they caught sight of a figure, a humanoid, moving purposefully through the jungle. It was a human. The alien crew watched, both wary and intrigued. The human, a lone individual with dark hair tied back, dressed in simple clothing, was collecting samples of plants, seemingly unaware of the alien presence nearby. They observed her from a distance, using their cloaking technology to remain undetected. This human was thriving in the environment that was slowly killing them. She moved confidently without any protective gear, her skin exposed to the very atmosphere that was wreaking havoc on their systems. The sight was both baffling and infuriating. How could this primitive species survive so easily in a place that was proving lethal to an advanced, spacefaring race like the Vexari? Commander Zorvac made a decision, then a desperate, risky decision. If they had any hope of survival, they needed to understand how the humans were able to thrive on this chaotic planet. He deactivated the cloaking shield and stepped out into the clearing, revealing himself to the human. The woman froze, her eyes widening in shock as she took in the sight of the alien standing before her. Zorvac raised his hands slowly, a gesture of peace. The rest of the crew emerged from the underbrush, their weakened states evident even in their advanced suits. The human hesitated, her instincts torn between fear and curiosity. Zorvac, using the translation module in his suit, spoke in halting English. "Help us." The human, though clearly frightened, seemed to understand. She took a step forward, her eyes scanning the group of aliens, taking in their injuries and weakened postures. There was a moment of silence, broken only by the rustling of the jungle around them. The woman nodded slowly, a mix of determination and empathy crossing her face. Commander Zorvac felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps against all odds, this human held the key to their survival. The human woman, whom Commander Zorvac would later come to know as Dr. Elena Ramirez, led the alien team away from their landing craft and deeper into the jungle. Though she was visibly nervous, her eyes darting between the imposing figures of the weakened aliens, there was a resolve in her that Zorvac admired. Even with a group of beings unlike anything she had ever seen before standing before her, Elena seemed more curious than frightened. The jungle was dense, with vines hanging low from the treetops and large-leaved plants growing in thick clusters, creating natural barriers that forced the group to weave around them. Zorvac and his team stumbled, disoriented not only by their surroundings but by their deteriorating health. Tikal was supported by Zorvac himself, his breathing heavy, while Nivac tried to keep pace, though his limbs seemed to lack coordination. The oppressive humidity of the jungle clung to them, amplifying the exhaustion they already felt. It wasn't just the atmosphere that seemed to fight against them, it was the entire environment. The jungle was teeming with life, a cacophony of sounds that never ceased, with countless eyes watching from the shadows. Zorvac couldn't shake the feeling that they were being suffocated by a world that didn't want them there. They were intruders, and the jungle seemed intent on reminding them of that. After nearly an hour of struggling through the undergrowth, the group arrived at Elena's makeshift camp. It was a modest setup, a small canvas tent, a portable stove, and a few metal boxes that Zorvac assumed contained equipment and supplies. What immediately caught his attention, however, was a series of containers and jars, each filled with different plants, soil samples, and even water from a nearby stream. Elena motioned for the aliens to sit on the ground near her tent while she rummaged through her belongings. Zorvac lowered Tikal carefully, the engineer collapsing onto the grass, his face pale and drenched in sweat. Velis, still barely conscious, was placed on a makeshift bed that Elena had quickly fashioned out of a sleeping mat and some spare cloth. Elena spoke in a soft, calming voice as she pulled out several jars and a small toolkit. Her words were foreign to Zorvac, but her gestures made her intentions clear. She was here to help. The translation module in his suit struggled with her speech, and Zorvac wished they had more advanced linguistics software. Yet, even with the limited understanding, her concern for their well-being was evident. She mixed herbs and other ingredients in a small bowl, crushing them into a paste before carefully applying it to Tikal's rash-covered skin. The paste had an immediate cooling effect, causing Tikal to sigh with relief. She then turned her attention to Velis, checking her vitals with a handheld device that emitted a soft blue light. Zorvac watched in fascination as Elena worked, her hands moving with practiced precision. She seemed to know the jungle intimately, its dangers, its remedies, and how to live in harmony with it. Zorvac needed answers, and he knew that they needed to establish some form of communication beyond simple gestures. He activated his suit's translation module, hoping to bridge the gap. He tried to convey their need for help, pointing to his team, mimicking pain, and then gesturing to the various plants and samples Elena had collected. Elena seemed to understand. She nodded and spoke slowly, her words coming through the translator with a heavy delay and some confusion. The gist, however, was clear. She was a scientist, a botanist researching the unique properties of the jungle's flora. She explained that the jungle was alive, filled with microorganisms and plants that had evolved to be both incredibly resilient and highly aggressive in their defense mechanisms. To the humans, these were nuisances they had learned to live with, but to the Vixari, they were proving to be deadly. She showed Zorvak a small vial containing a murky liquid, explaining that it was an extract from a plant that produced natural antibiotics, a substance she had been studying for its potential to fight infections. She believed it could help the Vixari team, at least in reducing the severity of their symptoms. Elena mixed the extract with water, handing the concoction to Zorvak and gesturing for him to drink. He hesitated, unsure of whether the human remedy would be compatible with his physiology. But there was little choice. Their own medical technology had failed, and the alternative was a slow, painful decline. He took the vial, the liquid a dark, bitter-smelling brew, and drank it. The taste was sharp, almost metallic, and Zorvak felt it burn slightly as it traveled down his throat. He handed the remaining vials to his team, watching as each of them drank in turn. After several minutes, a warmth spread through Zorvak's body, followed by a feeling of relief, the pain in his muscles easing slightly. It wasn't a cure, but it was a start. The hours that followed were grueling. Elena worked tirelessly, dividing her time between tending to the alien crew and gathering more of the herbs and plants that she believed could help them. She moved with surprising agility, disappearing into the jungle for long stretches and returning with handfuls of leaves and roots, her arms often scratched from the thick undergrowth. The aliens, meanwhile, were slowly beginning to recover. The extract seemed to stave off the worst of the symptoms, giving them enough strength to assist Elena in simple tasks. Zorvak insisted that those who were able should help, even if only to collect firewood or keep watch. Despite their weakened state, the team still retained their training, and Zorvak knew that staying active was crucial to keeping up morale. Nivak, though still weak, managed to help Elena prepare more of the herbal mixture. His scientific curiosity, even in their dire situation, drove him to understand the plants that were saving them. Elena, recognizing his interest, showed him how to crush the leaves, how to extract the juices, and which parts of the plants held the healing properties they needed. Despite the obvious communication barrier, a sense of camaraderie began to develop between the human and the aliens. Elena, though often working in silence, would occasionally smile at their efforts, her eyes softening with empathy. Zorvak noted her determination. This was a woman who was not afraid of the unknown, who saw them not as a threat but as beings in need of help. As they worked, Elena began to explain more about the dangers of the jungle, her words coming through the translation module in fragmented but understandable phrases. She spoke of the invisible organisms that thrived in the humidity, how they could infiltrate even the smallest wounds and cause severe infections. She explained that humans, over generations, had built up immunities to these microbes, an evolutionary advantage that allowed them to live in such a hostile environment. Zorvak listened, a growing realization dawning on him. The very thing that made Earth so dangerous, the complexity of its ecosystem, the resilience of its microbial life, was also what made humanity so remarkable. They had adapted, evolved, and learned to coexist with the dangers around them, turning what seemed like a death trap into a home. The Vixari, despite their advanced technology and superior knowledge, were unprepared for such raw, untamed power. They had relied too much on their technology, expecting it to solve every problem, to shield them from every danger. Here on Earth, that technology was rendered almost useless, and it was a human armed with nothing more than knowledge passed down through generations and a few rudimentary tools who was keeping them alive. Zorvak's respect for the humans grew with each passing hour. He saw in Elena the resilience that defined her species. The way she moved through the jungle, unafraid and knowledgeable, was something the Vixari could not replicate with all their training. It was a humbling experience, one that forced him to confront his own arrogance. As night fell again, the jungle once more transformed. The temperature dropped slightly, and the sounds of the nocturnal creatures grew louder. The darkness was thick, almost oppressive, with only the faint light from Elena's campfire illuminating the immediate area. The alien crew huddled close to the fire, the warmth offering some comfort against the unknown threats lurking in the dark. Elena sat across from them, her face illuminated by the flickering flames. She seemed calm, even as the jungle roared around them. Zorvac envied her ease. He and his crew were constantly on edge, every noise making them tense. Elena, noticing their unease, spoke softly, her words coming through the translator. "The jungle sounds are normal. The creatures, they do not attack if left alone." Zorvac nodded, though he found little comfort in her words. To him, the jungle was a hostile place and adversary. But he trusted Elena. She had saved them, after all, and he had no choice but to rely on her experience. Suddenly, a new sound pierced the night, a low, guttural growl that seemed to reverberate through the ground. The alien crew tensed, their eyes scanning the darkness. Elena's expression changed, her eyes narrowing as she stood, grabbing a long stick from beside her tent. She gestured for the crew to stay close, her posture tense. From the shadows, a pair of glowing eyes emerged, followed by a massive form of predator, its sleek body moving with predatory grace. The creature, covered in dark fur, had a long snout and sharp, gleaming teeth. It was unlike anything Zorvac had ever seen, an apex predator, perfectly adapted to its environment. The crew scrambled, trying to stand, their weakened bodies barely responding. Elena, however, moved forward, positioning herself between the predator and the aliens. She shouted, her voice echoing through the jungle, and brandished the stick, waving it aggressively. The creature hesitated, growling, its eyes locked on Elena. For a tense moment, it seemed as though the predator would attack. But then, with a final growl, it backed away, disappearing into the darkness as silently as it had come. Elena lowered the stick, her shoulders relaxing as she turned back to the aliens, a reassuring smile on her face. "Safe. For now," she said through the translator, her voice calm. Zorvac stared at her, a mix of awe and gratitude welling up inside him. This human, this lone scientist, had faced down a creature that could easily have killed them all, and she had done it without fear, without hesitation. She had saved them once again. The night passed without further incident, and as dawn broke, the jungle seemed less menacing. The sounds of the nocturnal creatures faded, replaced by the calls of birds and the rustling of small animals in the underbrush. The crew, though still weak, felt a renewed sense of hope. They were alive, and they had a chance thanks to Elena. Zorvac knew they couldn't stay in the jungle forever. They needed to contact the mothership to be extracted and treated properly. But he also knew that they owed their survival to Elena and the knowledge she had shared with them. She had shown them that survival on Earth required more than technology. It required an understanding of the land, an acceptance of its dangers, and the will to adapt. As they prepared to move, Zorvac approached Elena, gesturing to her, and then to the sky, trying to convey their need to leave. She nodded, understanding, and pointed towards the east. "There is a clearing," she said through the translator. "You can contact your ship from there." Zorvac nodded, gratitude evident in his posture. He motioned for his team to gather their belongings, and they began to follow Elena once more, this time with a sense of purpose. The journey would be difficult, but they were no longer helpless. They had a guide, and they had hope. The struggle for survival had humbled them, had shown them the strength of a species they had once dismissed as primitive. And as they walked through the dense jungle, following the human who had saved their lives, Zorvac knew that they would leave Earth not as conquerors or explorers, but as students grateful for the lessons they had learned from a small, blue planet and its resilient people.